I would say when we're trying to scale at that level, you have
Mhm.
to build a system. I think people overlook that. They think I can just throw more people or more logs on a fire and it's going to burn brighter. And it isn't that simple. To scale, you have to have things people can scale. You can't scale people. That's actually not a real thing because
Mhm.
everybody's
Mhm.
different, everybody's unique.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of Future Focused CXOs. I have a very interesting guest today, Aaron Hill. He is the SVP and also handles client sales for the Harbinger Institute. He's also the co-founder of Funnel House, and he's also an advisor at Jax.ai. Aaron, welcome to podcast. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. Thanks for having me, Jay. Great to be here. Yeah, I think you nailed it. Currently, my main role is the SVP of Sales and Client Success at the Harbinger Institute. I've been in
Mhm.
that position or an evolution of that position for about a year and a half. And prior to that, I worked for the Harbinger as a consultant for about 6 months on an individual basis. And I've been a sales person or a sales leader most of my life. I did a stint in revenue operations back in the mid 2010s when that was a thing that was blossoming. I did that at Huddle, which is a really large VC backed software company out of Lincoln, Nebraska, where I live. I'm married. I got 4 kids, a dog, a cat, live in a house. Yeah, I'm just an everyday guy trying to make ends meet and find meaning in life.
When we were having a conversation prior to this, you mentioned where you worked with your company and helped them move from 80 to 200. And that's a big shift, both in culture and technology and just in general process. So I'd love to hear what had to change for you both as operationally as a company, and what did you have to change personally in order to manage that movement from 80 to 200?
Yeah. So at Huddle, when I started, they were 80 million in ARR. And by the time I'd left, they were over 200 million in ARR. The employee count was a little over 1,000 by the time we left. And I think we were just under like 800 or so when I started. So there was some significant expansion that took place. I'd say the biggest growth was joining as a sales leader. I was part of what we called our elite business unit. And it was basically like Huddle serves sports teams. They basically capture video and do statistical analysis from that video for highly competitive athletic teams, whether at an amateur level or a professional level. And so I was building a sales team, basically a BD and sales team for the elite business, where we'd go after Division I colleges or professional sports associations and teams to try and get our products and services in those organizations, where we had a decent amount of penetration, but there was more we could do. And so that's what I was hired for. And quickly, in my relationship with the leader, it pivoted towards sales enablement and revenue operations. He saw my aptitude for training when I onboarded my entire team that was brand new and created kind of all the content for them. And he's, you got a knack for this. So we want to scale this across the team. I ended up overseeing all 350 salespeople and their training that took place as an enablement leader. And we really built out the enablement function to be a lot more rich. And so that was pivot for me. Like I've always loved training, but being fully embedded and immersed in that's all we do was different. Building a team out that focuses on the learning and development of go-to-market professionals is new. So that was interesting. And then quickly, the leader that I reported to over there wasn't employed anymore. So he's like, I need you to own all revenue operations. And I was like, I don't even know what revenue operations is. So you're going to have to help me out a little bit. He was cool and he gave me a lot of resources and I was able to tap into a lot of communities and it made more sense than I thought. I'd worked for a Salesforce consultancy as a salesperson before. So I was savvy in Salesforce and I knew a lot about the marketplace and the different ecosystem that existed there. And it served me well to negotiate some really great deals for our tech stack and put pieces in place that leveraged automation and just made workflows easier. And we had a data team under us as well. So we were able to capture a lot of insights. So it was just a very big shift in personally, like my development. It's not an area I ever thought I'd spend a lot of time, but I fell in love with it really fast. And now it's probably more important than anything else I do in my current job. But at Huddle, there were obviously some massive changes. Like we built out an enablement team, we built out a revenue operations team above it. We restructured that. We put in place like project management disciplines. We ended up using like job methodology and Scrum practices within both teams. So we had consistent reporting and we were responsive to form ticket requests that the sales team would say, hey, this flow sucks. Hey, this system's not working. Hey, we need training on this. And now we could be responsive like a product team for the internal sales user. And so that was another thing that was an evolution. And then by the time I left the company, the SVP who hired me was gone. And so he was the guy I loved working for most. And the COO that I reported to at that time, he asked me to reorganize the entire business operations of the company and spent a couple months doing that to a point where like over 300 people were impacted by that organizational shift. But in doing that, I like wrote myself out of a job because the people who reported to me were amazing and were ready for something bigger. And so that was obviously a big change from personnel perspective at the company. And for me, obviously, I had to move on to something else. But yeah, those are some of the bigger changes, but they continue to grow even to this day. They've got better market penetration than they've ever had. They've increased their ACV significantly. So the company's doing really well.
I think you told 3 to 4 big points. I think what made this 80 million to 200 million ARR jump, right? If you have to say one thing that really made significant difference, what would that be?
I would say when we're trying to scale at that level, you have to build a system. I think people overlook that. They think I can just throw more people or more logs on a fire and it's going to burn brighter. And it isn't that simple. To scale, you have to have things people can scale. You can't scale people. That's actually not a real thing because everybody's different. Everybody's unique. Everybody has different work ethics, skill sets. You can't just hire one more of that guy or that girl. You've got to find a system that they can rely and fall back upon that enables them to behave in a way that's consistent and increases the volume and velocity of what they're doing. And so I think critical to our success was investing in enablement and operations to just create a pattern in which anybody can come in, learn, and be successful.
That is one of the key things everybody talks about, but I think you have been there, done that, because what we see for a company when they engage us is they don't really have a very well-oiled system which can make their salespeople successful. These people are going all over the place to do simple stuff. And you hit the nail on the ground. I think that was so nice. I want to change the subject to you back again, Aaron. And you did mention that you found a purpose in building your career. And if I recall it correctly, you said that doing a good, high-paying job for me, not just paying my bills, but also funding my vacations. From there, you shifted. Why don't you talk about that journey?
Yeah, I don't want to talk too long about this, but it is a longer story. It's like a life journey. I got into sales because it allowed me to control my own income. And oftentimes, like to put that in perspective, I just share the anecdote about how I grew up. Like my parents, they would pay us 30 cents for every year old we were. And it wasn't until I was like 17 years old that I realized like I was getting screwed. It was like $5 an hour. And at that point, I was like, no longer in my life are people going to tell me how much money I'm going to make. I'm going to be in control of that forever. And so I got into sales for that very reason. Like I wanted to make as much money as I wanted, do what I wanted to do, and nobody was going to tell me any different. And so it's always about me, and that was fine. And then I got married and had kids. I had more responsibilities, things I had to pay for, other people I was responsible for, and things I wanted to do to make my life enjoyable. And so I kept thinking if I bought cooler stuff and I went on more trips and I gave my kids and wife all these opportunities that we'd be happy, and rode that train and learned a lot of cool things until last year. And I started to realize like my health wasn't doing too great. I needed to get some different things in order. I had some mental health stuff going on. There was a conversation I had with my wife where it's like, I've had this goal of retiring at 50 since I was like 20 years old. And I'm like on pace to do that, but I'm not going to have made a difference when I do. And it just was like very humbling to realize that I could work so hard for so long and know that I've not built the kind of relationships that I probably could have if I've been focused on other people, that I'm not going to feel fulfilled by anything I really did because I don't feel like I've actually made a contribution that's positive to the world. And I was really worried at the time that there was no way for me to translate skills that I had and the experience that I had into something truly meaningful. Because my perspective was like, my dad was a doctor, so he changed people's lives. Like he did that every day. And then I wasn't going to work for a nonprofit because nobody gets paid anything there. And I wasn't going to be a teacher. I'm not that big of a fan of kids. I like my own kids. There's other people's kids. It's hard. So there's just a lot of things like that I'm not super into. And so I worried, like, how do I translate these skills into something more meaningful? And I was grateful that as I was working for Winning by Design, another revenue consultancy, we teach a lot of revenue models to people. And one of my students in a class, he came from a company called the Arbiter Institute, which is obviously where I work now. And I'd never heard of this company. And he's like, I want to work with you. And I was like, great, well, let me introduce you to a salesperson here for the company. He goes, no, I want you to work at my company. I was like, let me change emails real quick. What are we talking about? Typical sales guy. I want to know what else I can do. And for 6 months, there was no way for them to afford me at the time for what I was paid. They're a smaller business. And I made that pretty clear, but I ended up doing part-time consultancy for them. And Cameron was kind enough to share all their content with me. He's like, you should read all of our books, watch all these videos. Didn't do any of that. I worked for the company and helped them identify a lot of critical issues with the system because they wanted to scale, and recommended a lot of those things. And then as my health started to surface, like I got to do something different, I decided to take time away from winning by design and focus on that. And I was like, I should probably read all these books. So I read the books, and through reading Leadership and Self-Deception, Anatomy of Peace, The Outward Mindset, which are the three main books, it just changed my view that I can, as an accountable person with a lot of skills, be truly impactful to an organization that is doing great things. I don't have to be profit driven exclusively. I can do that in a way that is fulfilling others. And I can actually do it at the Arbinger Institute. They want nothing more than for me to come work there full time and lead their go-to-market. So like, how do I do that? And I believe strongly that what Arbinger does is one of the most necessary things for humanity. Like, we all go to work every day and it sucks. It's a drain on our lives. We talk about not bringing our work home with us all day, every day. Imagine what it would feel like if bringing your work home actually was beneficial to your home life. You were working in a way that made you feel better. It was culturally impactful. And I realized that if I can share a way for that to be real and do it with the world and do what I do best all at the same time, I'm going to have amazing fulfillment in my life. And that's what I want, is to be able to say that the work that I did was meaningful. It had a positive impact on people. And I was able to do something I was really good at, that I love anyway, and pay for the things that I need to pay for, while also making other people's lives much better. And so I'm very fortunate that my journey has taken me on a path to be able to do that. I know not everybody has that luxury, but that's now more important to me than anything, is just doing work that's impactful.
You are maybe one in a million or one in a billion who has found that purpose. I'll be very honest with you, we all struggle with it, but kudos to you, you could reach there.
One of the things I see is it's so important that so many people build their identity around what they do. But when it comes down to it, their identity is what allows them to do what they do. And I think that shift in understanding that you have these skills and you can put them to use for profit plus growth plus purpose is such an important distinction that everybody seems to want to know how to do, but often struggles to get there in the busyness of life. And I imagine with 4 kids, a cat and a dog and all the things on top of work, you have to be very intentional and take the time to learn how to infuse what you do into all these areas of your life. I love that. I totally appreciate that about you and what you're doing. Can you talk to me a little bit about, as you said, you're going through several struggles, both personal and professional. What does it feel like now that you are working on purpose?
Yeah, great. Life's good in a lot of ways. There's no complaints I can make about what I get to do every day. I'm still a sales leader. When we have expectations, and if we're ever falling short or not on pace to those expectations, there's still that stress that can come to everybody. I think a big difference though now versus in my past lives is that when you're just making money and not hitting targets, you got nothing to fall back on. Nothing. Because not only are you a failure in a sense that you're not hitting someone else's expectation, your work has no meaning or purpose other than to profit for yourself. So you're literally trading stress for providing for yourself, which is a horrible way to live. It's just not fun. And I still have that same level of stress, right? Like if we're ever behind expectations or things like that, we're fortunate that we're doing really well. But when those moments happen, that it's like, oh man, we got to do better. We got to do more. What I have now that I've never had before is I know that to the extent that we're doing anything, we're making a very positive difference in other people's lives. So we may not be doing it at the pace that we want to be doing it, but we're still doing it, and it's meaningful and it's powerful to know that's where we're at. So I'm very grateful that I get to do that in a way that's helpful. And then we talk a lot about that at work. We are mission focused. And I think one thing that I learned would be helpful to everybody here is the founder of the company. He has like kind of this underlying philosophy that was life-changing for me, which is recurring revenue is the result of delivering recurring impact. And you can even break that statement down algebraically, and it's revenue is a byproduct of impact. That's just what it is. It's as simple as that. So if our goal is to generate revenue, what should we be actually focused on doing? Delivering impact to others. And so that has been super helpful for me to get to a place where it's like, all right, I now can find a way to impact other people's lives positively and then get paid for it. And that's not isolated to where I work and what I get to do. In fact, anybody who's delivering a product or a service or a solution that addresses someone else's problem if they just focus on the impact they're giving those organizations through that implementation of whatever it is they do, then the revenue is going to come. What I love about this most, and the epiphany to me, is that anyone can be mission driven and profit focused. You don't have to choose. And I think that we have been led to believe differently. Like, I'm either mission driven or I'm profit focused. And you don't have to pick one. You can do both things. In fact, if you don't, one's going to be short term and the other is not going to work anyway. So it's not sustainable to do anything but that.
Great. I have one follow-up question. You guys are doing a lot of leadership training, right? In which you're definitely finding a great purpose into it. But my question is, what are those 4 or 5 things you would like to say from a perspective of which areas you typically train people, and how do you see their life changing after that, and what kind of feedback do you get from them?
Yeah, the idea of the outward mindset, which is really what we focus all of our training on, is this idea that other people matter like we matter, which seems like, duh, I learned that in kindergarten, like it's obvious, but it isn't. When we're working, we have our own objectives, our needs, our challenges, our priorities, and we inherently are more focused on those things. And oftentimes we put ourselves in silos or swim lanes where we're just less concerned about other people's objectives and challenges and needs than we are our own. We just think of it that way. We could also fall into a trap of saying that we're better than other people. You're not. Humans are humans. There's no better or worse. We are the same species. We have the same infinite potential of good. We also have the same level of fragility and weakness. Like, all of us have that present in our lives. And so when we acknowledge those two realities, it's, I can't do anything great alone. So I have to work with other people. And in working with other people, I need to see them the way I see myself, as though they are as relevant and as important. And putting that in practice in the workplace takes a lot of time and attention. But what we've learned in teaching leaders about this is that they often don't. But when they start doing it regularly, applying the tools that we teach them to do this more subconsciously and proactively, that transcends to every aspect of their life. Because leadership is just a relationship, right? Like, it's just a relationship in which you're wanting to serve and guide. And what relationships do we actually not want to do those things in if we are inherently helpful? And so learning how to do that from a lens of, like, how can I see another person as though they matter like me, accept them for who they are in the present, where they are, and know that I'm the same way, and honor that reality. And then from that knowledge, respond to whatever sense I have to be helpful. Because that's the cool thing about people, is that every time we think about a problem, we are naturally fixers. We're going to have a sense of, what can I do to be more helpful in this situation? And so as we make people alive to these ideas, it does transcend so far beyond the workplace. They actually say, this changed the relationship I had with my kids. It changed the relationship I had with my spouse. It changed the relationship I had with my mother-in-law, whatever it might be. And that's what brings me more meaning. If I can help people in their relationships beyond even the workplace feel better, then I'm going to know I had a positive impact, and I can rest a lot more easily because I wasn't just in it for myself, which for a long time was all I cared about. So I felt fine. But now I'm not there.
I did want to ask you that. How has the conversation changed with your children?
It's so fascinating you say that. The first time I went through an Armature workshop for myself, they were inviting us to think about people that we work with, but the only person I could think about was my daughter. She's 12, she'll be 13 next month. And what I learned going through the workshops was that I didn't see her as though she mattered like I mattered. I wasn't taking the time to really think about what it's like to be her, to have me as a dad, to go to the school that she goes to have the kind of friends that she has, to have the hobbies that she has, to really ponder, what must it be like to be my daughter, and think about that. And when I took the time to think about that, it invited me to, there's a lot of things I don't actually know. So I need to just have open conversations with her to understand that I have blind spots and learn from her, right? What is it like? Ask those questions genuinely with authenticity and see what I learned from those things. And then only when I've got a real clear understanding of where she's at and what she's going through, am I actually in a position where I can correct, teach, communicate, those kinds of things that we often find ourselves doing instinctively with anybody who's doing something we don't want them to do, but they're not ready to receive it and we're not going to be effective. Only when I've got that am I capable of having earned the trust to do it, but also am I going to do it in a way that actually lands? Because if I'm just correcting what she's doing, which is what I've been doing as a dad since she was born, that hurts. If the only conversation I have with a person is they're telling me to do something different, I don't know that I want to have a lot of conversations with that person. But if they come to the conversation, seeing me for who I am, accepting me that way, and then hearing me and appreciating that, when they give me advice, I'm going to be very much attuned to what they say because I know it's coming up from a place of like, they're invested in my success. And so, Steve, for me, I think I'm working on a way, and I'm further along than I've ever been, on my daughter actually feeling like I'm invested in her success. I've told her I've loved her forever, and I've never been the negative things that dads have been for many generations, and it has been transformative.
One thing you said, I'm going to steal it and it's just going to stick with me for life, is treat other person as equally important as you are. And I do remember there is a saying, or there is a book that I read about Mahatma Gandhi, and he always used to say that treat others as you wanted to be treated. But that reminded me that what you guys are doing is really implementing that. And coming back to your training, we've seen a lot, we have attended a lot. We get pumped up for 2 weeks or a week, and then everything goes back to the same thing. It comes down to two things, right? One, it definitely is the system, right? Is system really supporting what was taught, right? Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head saying that your system has to be in place if you really want to grow from this scale. And second is definitely, are you really connecting with people whom you are giving training to? Or you are just doing a lip service, coming and talking about your methodology and making them do some workshops and getting out of that place? Because many companies, and we work with a lot of sales training companies and leadership training companies, because we are those system people who put that system in place for them, right? Of course, with the guidance of these guys, but that's actually what we do. And many places I see that, and that's the key differentiator, what I feel when I'm really talking to you about.
Yeah, I think you're right on. Implementing a system that enables the kind of change that you want to have is critical. And change management isn't easy. We talk about culture here, and we talk about it as an idea of collective mindset, like how everybody thinks and how everybody acts as a result of how they're thinking is the culture. And so if the culture is resistant because people don't like change in general, and they don't see how it benefits them, or they don't see why it's actually appropriate, or even understand what the problem is in the first place that warrants change, it's a challenge. But then, like you said, it's not like awareness solves the problem. It is a first step in addressing the issue, but you have to do a sustained approach that actually, with that awareness, what are we going to do to actually shift the culture, change all of the mindsets collectively that need to be changed to where we're all pointing in the same direction, wanting the same thing. And then oftentimes systems are the difference between that working or not. If everything that I do is re-engaging me to think that way, then it's much simpler than if I have to go find reasons to think this way, because I'm already doing a million other things. So I think you're hitting the nail on the head there.
I think a way to put that, like the solution and the technology can give you both the self-awareness, what's happening, what are my people doing? Where are they agreeing? What are they believing? What are they acting like? Because I'm seeing it with data. But then also it creates that consistent intentionality towards, we want you to behave this way for optimal results so that you can get your message and our products and our revenue generating items out into the world. It does both for you, but both happen also from the humans making that decision to become self-aware and then also become consistently intentional about, we are going in this direction and managing that way, which I understand. As any sales leader knows, you have to tell them where to go, create the vision, bring that awareness, and then you have to drive them to, that means you do your job like X over and over again. And if something changes, we will make adjustments, but we are essentially going in this direction.
That's wonderful.
I can keep talking to you for hours, keep learning from you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed talking to you all.
Yeah, but one last question definitely we would like to ask about the hype about AI. So talk to me about, in this leadership training, in the sales training, in this arena that you are, how do you see AI making a very positive impact, and which are the areas to watch for?
Yeah, there's a couple ways I could address this. The first is how we within our go-to-market team are leveraging artificial intelligence to get work done. And a lot of the technology that we use leverages amazing benefits of that. For example, we use Gong at Arbinger for all of our client interactions. And I've been so impressed with the way that they've embedded AI into their systems to not only create outlines of calls for the transcriptions that they do, but like even engaged auto-populates follow-up emails with all the critical items that were discussed, as well as a link.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Saving people so much time. That's been super helpful. We have a lot of components of like our HubSpot instance and 6sense that allows us to see who is interested in learning more about what we're doing, who's engaging with our content, who's looking at competitors of ours, and then distilling that down into language we can use to reach out to those folks proactively and share, hey, this is why we're connected, why I'm reaching out, here's what we're thinking. All that makes the work of humans much easier. One thing that we haven't really gone public with yet, but I can tease a little bit, is we at Arbinger, from a client-facing perspective, we know that the way we've done our business for the last 40 years can be done so much better by leveraging the power of computing. And part of the reason I was brought in was to embed SaaS practices that I've specialized in for so many years into an organization that really didn't do anything related to software. We had a portal, we have a cloud portal that people can log into to watch our videos, but it's really limited to that. It's not on subscription. And the future of where we want to go is thinking about how people work together. And Steve, you're like at the forefront of this. It's really interesting because you were talking about if there were a way to capture how people were thinking and feeling about one another, or their level of understanding about how they collaborate, what would that look like and how that data benefit us? One of the limits of humanity is that we're not computers. We can't go that fast. We can't think about everything at the same time. And in order for me today to know what someone's objectives, needs, challenges are, what their different roles are within the job they have, I got to go ask them, which takes time. But imagine a world where an organization of 10,000 people was having them, with accountability, provide that information about themselves to a degree that it's broadcast to anyone in the organization. And then you can see, where is their role alignment from person to person, leveraging AI? Where are we seeing opportunities for potential conflict based on the different priorities that these people have, that we can actually get in front of and evade by having them connect manually to discuss those things and say, hey, here's how we can pivot our respective objectives to be in direct collaboration with one another instead of working against each other. Or maybe it's, hey, if you got this, I don't need to be doing that. I can focus all my time over here. Because how many of us have been in a situation where we find out that another department, another team was doing the same thing we were doing? And we're like, oh, why have we not been working together on this? It creates so much conflict. So that is a place that we ultimately want to go, leveraging AI at Arbinger to empower the teams that want to invest in this cultural transformation to have a systematic way to do it, and to go above and beyond the idea of like human resource management, and to say, hey, we've got people that are capable of amazing things that computers can't do. We also got computers that are capable of amazing things that humans can't do. How do we collaborate together in a way that achieves outcomes that really have never been done before, but make the organizations highly more efficient? And so that's the future of where we hope to go to complement what we're doing today.
Okay, man. Thank you. I think the last question really is, what advice would you give to other people who are really watching this? And we all are looking for advice of how do I grow? But in your case, I think the advice would be, how do you find that purpose to career combination in their life? What can they be mindful about, and how can they really get there?
I think some of the questions I was asked when I was younger that maybe weren't as helpful as people thought they were at the time is like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be when you grow up? Those kind of things. And to a young mind, I think it's hard to answer those questions. And I think that's why we see people in college like stuck, not really knowing what they want to do all the time. I think some other questions is that might be more helpful that I'd invite everybody to ask themselves is, how can you apply yourself best to positively impact others? If you are focused on that, you're going to think about two things. What am I actually good at? And how can I use that to impact other people's lives positively? And what I can promise is that if you do that, monetizing it is pretty simple, actually. Like, people want to say thank you, which means if appreciation is what they're wanting to give you back, sometimes the form of money is actually the simplest way to do that. And so it's not hard to monetize impact if you are thinking about, how can I apply myself to be most impactful to others? So I would just invite anyone to ask that question if they're looking for direction in their lives, and you'll quickly find the answer.
Wow, great advice, Aaron. Thank you so much for being on podcast.